obviously the government's made changes. Yeah, the changes have meant like a lot of people have realised, man, we need to get our move on. You know, deadlines create outcomes.
Yeah.
People have to make decisions and they have to move. Let me tell you about a family.
Let's go.
They earn great money, they've got good savings, and they've got good super. And you might be like, well, what's the problem there? Well, the hard part might be they live in Sydney, and just because you're on great money in Sydney doesn't mean you can afford to buy the property you want where you live in Sydney.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So let's take a closer look at this. So I'm talking about a couple. They're a bit older, which means that they've got no dependents.
Yeah.
The children are adults.
So like what, mid-50s?
Everyone's off living their life. Yeah, they're in their 50s. But it also means senior role's good money.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, so income's...
Peak of the income.
Income's, up around 300 per annum.
Yeah.
These families are comfortable.
Yeah. Their comfort game, eh?
Comfortable. So they've got savings and they've been able to save because they're on relatively good money. Let's say 200,000 in savings. Income's north of 300. However, and their super's solid. The super's like 600.
600,000, wow.
Yeah, so it's a good amount because they've been on good money for quite a while. And the challenge is, even though they're on great money, it's not enough to buy where they live in Sydney. And why is that? Because, you get suburbs in Sydney, they're like 2, 3, 4, 5 milli, bro.
Yeah,
wow. Woo, not only that, you're 200,000. It ain't a lot. And so people hear about the 5% deposit schemes and this and that, but they cap out. They don't cap out on income anymore. So you can earn $300,000 a year and you still get access to
still be eligible, yeah.
But what you can't do is they cap out in terms of property purchase price.
Yeah.
So as a first homeowner, you can have a 5% deposit at a maximum of 1.5 million.
1.5 million.
And that sounds like a lot of money.
In Sydney, yeah.
But in some suburbs in Sydney, bro, that's a unit.
Yeah, that's right.
You can't even buy a house
the
in the suburb
location,
for that. No way.
1.5. Yeah, that's the cap of,
Yeah, that's the cap. So it caps out. And so, the couple is forced to go, well, what do we do? Do we want to move and live in an area we don't want to live in? Or do we actually just buy an investment property for our first property instead of the property we want to live in?
Yeah.
And some people who are very comfortable, they're like, oh, actually, don't worry about the owner-occupier. Don't worry about the house we're going to live in. We'll just start building an investment portfolio. And it's like, okay, are you sure? Because you could buy under the 1.5 million caps and the money that you've got, you could buy. It's just not going to be in the area that you want.
Yeah, but if they buy investment, then they lose out on the grants.
But they wouldn't get the grants on the properties they're buying anyway because they're too expensive. So they're not missing out on anything.
No, I'm saying if they go the investment way, they want to buy investment property.
Yeah, so they don't get the grants on the investment property. Yeah. But even if they went the
first
homeowner route, they don't get the grants anyway.
With what they actually want.
Because what they want, there's no grants and incentives. And so this is an important...
So lose strategy.
So while you're making a decision, you've got to understand what's on the table.
Yeah.
Because normally we would say to people, well, okay, what you don't want to do is lose the grants and incentives, so buy the owner-occupier first.
Yeah.
Right? But if they're going to try and buy a $2.5 million house,
you lose out on the grants.
Ain't no grants and incentives. Ain't no one helping you to buy no $3 million property. You're on your own, bro.
100%.
Right? So in that instance, there's no loss. They don't lose anything. So they'll go out, they'll buy an investment property. And so what they decided to do is we went up to Queensland. We bought them a property up in Queensland. It was a brand new property up there. I think they spent like $750. It's worth like $920, $930, $950 now.
Yeah.
Like the market's gone gangbusters. If you're like, well, how long did it take for that to happen, Massey? Well, that was about 9 months.
9 months?
10 months, yeah. It went up pretty quickly. Well, the Brisbane market's been pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
Right. It was great timing. They got great equity and uplift on that property. So that's the first thing.
So when they bought that would have just been an investment property, no grants.
Yeah, investment property, no grants. Yeah, but they've got their own cash. They just buy their own property.
Yes, and it's a bigger deposit for them.
Yeah, so just 10% plus costs.
Yeah.
So 75, they might have spent maybe
LMI.
$120,000, 100, something like that. Yeah, they pay a bit of LMI, they'll incur LMI, they'll pay stamp duty plus the 10% deposit. And our goal is generally to preserve finances.
Cash, yeah.
Yeah, preserve cash, get them closer to
the
the
next scenario suited them.
That scenario suited them. The timing was perfect. They got an uplift, like I said, 150K.
Yeah, mad.
Over 8, 9, 10 months up in Queensland. But then they also set up a self-managed super fund And they're like, okay, let's go buy some property. We worked out, they can buy a couple of properties inside of their super and still have a good amount of cash left over.
A couple of properties?
Yeah.
Super.
Yeah, inside of their super. So you're talking in a period of, 9 months, a couple with 2 professionals earning, north of 300, with $200,000 cash and $600,000 in super, in a very, very, very comfortable format, buying multiple properties and getting 3 properties relatively quickly, making an active decision that they didn't want to buy the property that they were going to move into.
Yeah.
Because it was just a little bit out of reach. A little bit out of reach. Not a little, a lot.
A lot.
It was out of reach. But they were smart enough to make the decision to go anyway.
Yeah, to
They
get
have 3
in.
properties, and just over a year they'll have 4 by the end of this year, because they can use the equity from the first property to buy property number 4. So that family, they arrive, they've got to make the decision. The big decision for them was, do we buy an owner occupier or do we go investment? Generally, at Teach Me About Property, our preference is, if you can get access to the grant, you go owner occupier.
Other people's money.
Yeah, other people's money, and you can only be a first time owner once.
True.
So as soon as you buy the investment property, you're not like, I'll go do it now.
Yeah, you lose out.
Yeah, you lose out.
Lose options.
Yeah, and so that family's in the process of, settling and buying their other 2 properties through their self-managed super fund. Obviously, the government's made changes.
Yeah.
So that's kicked them
But
into
they locked
gear.
in before that?
Well, yeah, they've locked in now.
Recently?
Now.
With those changes?
Now.
Yeah, I feel like a time, man.
Yeah, the changes have meant, like, a lot of people have realised, man, we need to get our move on. We need to get about this. And that's a good thing. Deadlines create outcomes.
Yeah.
Because people have to make decisions.
100%.
They have to move. Yeah. So that's a scenario, a family. And look, wonderful family. They do a lot of good work. Very smart, very intelligent, very professional, very senior in their roles. And finances and property and wealth creation is just one of those things.
What would a family like that on that income savings, why would they choose not to buy property? Why have they chosen not to buy property?
Lifestyle and comfort. We travel a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, man, we love our life. We live our life.
2 times a year, 3 times a year.
4 or 5.
4! Oh man, they were living.
Yeah,
They were living.
It's just
Every long weekend.
Well, there's no expenses in the home. It's not like you got no. They're empty nesters. 2 great incomes, empty nesters, no debt. There's just money, lots of money, and so people get very comfortable.
Yeah.
And why do they choose? It's not a focus. It's not a priority. And then eventually they come up for air and they're like, yeah, I think we better get moving on.
Yeah, time.
But the wonderful thing for those families is when they choose, they can move.
Move quick, yeah.
They can
So what's
move.
that, 3 properties within 9 months?
Maybe 10 months.
10 months. 3 properties in 10 months.
3 properties in 10.
1 investment, 2 within
10,
the super.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Yeah, and what you've also got to understand, often when we talk about the games, the comfort game,
Yep.
the wealth game, the poverty game, people move because of pain,
Yep.
right? In the comfort game, there is no pain. So there's less motivation.
Uche, let's
Yeah,
chill.
and if it takes another year, what does it matter? But generally, the impetus comes because of age. People are like, oh, actually, we need to get a lot
That's
more
the big one?
serious about
That's
this.
the big one you see?
Yeah, like if you've just, clicked over into your 50s, you're 51, 52, you're starting to look down the barrel of, I've maybe got 10, 15 years left working.
Of working.
So I need to get serious.
What assets do I have?
I don't even own a property. Oh, we need to own a property. And the husband or wife, oh yeah, but I love my life.
Life is good right now.
Life is
Right now.
good, baby.
Right now.
And so what they need to understand is eventually your situation is going to change aggressively. You're going to go from $300,000+ a year to being on the
Pension.
on the pension.
What's that, 20,000 a year?
It's
50?
$513.25 a week, which is less than most people's rent.
Bro.
So
Scary,
you
man.
can't afford to pay for a roof over your head, can't afford to eat, can't afford to put the lights on,
Scary.
can't afford to travel. It's gone. Everything's gone. And so the smart ones figure out.
Wouldn't you say also health would probably be related, like to that, them wanting to do something? Health
Well, for
related?
these ones, no, not necessarily. Well, it can. Health can be an impetus for people to get serious about things. But in this instance, for this family, health wasn't a motivator.
Okay, yeah, age, yeah.
Healthy family, they're fit,
Yeah.
they're executives, they're doing amazing things, but age is present. And you're like, oh, we've
stop.
got to get serious about this thing. But like I said, the good news is they've got the resources, they've just lacked the focus. So once they get the focus, then they deploy the resources towards wealth creation.
Yeah.
They can do it very quickly. And then they'll continue to buy, 1 to 2 properties per annum, over the next 3 to 4 years. And that'll get them to the 10 properties in, 5 years. And then they have options moving forward. Then life looks very different when they get to the point in time where the earned income tap turns off.
Yeah.
And that's what they want to prepare for.
100.
So those comfortable families in their late 40s, early 50s, even mid 50s, time tends to be the primary motivating factor. You ain't young no more.
Time's ticking.
You ain't young no more. And not only that, when you're not young no more, everyone around you is getting older as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're starting to have grandkids and all of that stuff is starting to happen. And they're just like, wow, man, we got to get serious about this. And then if you add in the health stuff on top of that, that can happen. Oh, game over. Game over. So it's good to be able to help a family who's realizing while their resources are high enough, that it's time to take action and time to change the course where they're going. And that's the hard part. If your life is good and you're traveling 4, 5, 6 times a year.
Yeah, why do you feel the need to?
You don't stress about finances. You don't stress about bills. Got a couple of hundy in the bank. Man, what's the issue?
Yeah.
And the issue is that all changes. And if you get $300,000 a year in income, your $200,000 in the bank ain't going to go very far.
Yeah.
Even your $600,000 in super, your lifestyle to maintain your current
that
level of
lifestyle that you live in. No.
I'm telling you, your life is about to change.
Yeah, that's when you got to start buying assets and building assets around you.
So you've got to get assets, and your assets will change your life permanently. The assets will appreciate in value, and that doesn't change. What changes is your earned income. And when you get to 51, 52, 53, you start saying, oh, we should be paying attention to this, right? But that attention creates urgency.
Yeah, focus.
Yeah, focus.
Action.
Yeah, so talking about that family and seeing their behaviour, they're also very good at making decisions. They're bosses at work. They're leaders.
Well, once like you said, once the focus is there.
Yeah, it's just a lack of focus. It's just not a priority. And you don't have to make changes. There's no pressure. There's no negative pain creating the urgency for you to change everything. It's just not there.